such a beautiful country. The country has been so good to us. I love the United States. I had so many friends in our life, and especially in the beginning, who just supported us in every phase we were going through. I learned so much those first couple of years when I didn't speak a word English, and I boarded the plane in Austria. On the way to the airport, I had an accident with my brother drove me. Had an accident, and the car was pretty much totaled, and somebody had to bring us to the airport. So the big story for me is that I didn't really want to come because I had just started my profession, which I love dearly.
Yeah.
I worked hard for. I was very proud, and I guess I was good at. But you know, when you're in love, many things happen. So we got married, we got engaged in.
Can I cut in?
We got engaged in 64 in the fall, got married in 65 in July, and he had the offer from Sears to travel as a ski consultant, and he said, darling, I gotta go, and I make lots of money, and then I build you a delivery home in Neustift. That was the promise he made. The promise was a little different. I was pregnant, and my mom couldn't believe that he left shortly after the wedding. So there was nothing for me to do but, to follow him. I missed him, and I wanted to be with him. But it was not that easy because I had a big job, which I had pretty much a contract for years. And so I found somebody who would step in for me, and I actually thought I would just come over for a little while, and in the spring we would go home. Well, then the thing happened that Bernie was born a little bit too early, not as expected, and we ended up with a big hospital bill and no insurance. He had only a temporary job as a ski instructor and was supposed to go home in the spring because his visa would expire. Well, we couldn't go, He applied for a visa, and then you cannot leave the country. So here I was, not speaking a word English, being in a foreign country, missing my hometown, my family, missing everybody, but I was with the one I loved.
Yeah.
And that helped me overcome. So I just looked at this little baby and I thought, well, what's next?
Yeah.
But all the ski instructors, Ottmar Schneider Ski School from Austria, which were all certified instructors, about 25 of them, they gave us a beautiful party. I came home with the baby, which I couldn't come home with the baby because the baby was born in the upstairs attic room. The night before, he told me, you got to come today because it's a big race, I'm going to beat the boss. Well, I really was kind of getting a little shy because I was always worried people would ask me something and I couldn't answer them. But I wanted to go there, and I stood there about for 2 hours watching them race. And then we sang, and then we got home, and about 1 o'clock, I had such a sore back, and I thought, oh my God, what's going on? Of course, even though I went to school for so long to know how to deliver babies, but I never knew what it is like to have one.
Yeah.
So we wanted this upstairs little room with no bathroom, no water. They had skipped down those 2 stairs in the kitchen, and I looked myself a little bit over, and I found out that it's going to be the baby. Then I woke him up, and he said, oh, no. He was tired, of course, skiing all day. And a son of the guy who brought us to this country, stayed with us that weekend in that room. And he said, oh my God, what's going on? Snowing like mad outside. And I said, call the doctor, it's going to be the baby. Called the doctor said he has never done anything with babies, we should bring him to the hospital. They should bring me to the hospital. Well, the hospital was about an hour and a half away, and I said, we can't go anymore, it's too late. So ski instructors living nearby shoveled out the car, which wasn't ours, one of our friends from Akron, Ohio, shoveled out the car, and in the meantime, people ran up and down, and I said to Hans, tell him to boil some water and bring me some fresh linens, Couldn't talk to anyone because I couldn't talk English, couldn't speak English. So they came up, and they came in and turned around again and left. And the time came, and I said to my husband, it's it, stay here. So he delivered the baby. And I remember the head was out, and I said, what now, what now? And I said, just pull him out. Here he was, a cute little bundle. And now, the next step, how do you detach the umbilical cord? So that's probably a story which not too many people believe, but I had a bra in the drawer. I said, get a scissor and cut this little bra straw and tie it up, and then go down and dump the scissor in hot water and come up and cut it, and that's what we did. And then I had nothing. I had absolutely nothing because I wasn't prepared. So I took a little pillow and made a little hole in it, a little dunk, and put the baby in there and wrapped the towel around. In the meantime, the car was warm, and the son of our sponsor, Hans, and I went to the hospital.
In Potaski.
And it's such a long story, I don't want to go on, but it was it was not that easy, because here I was in the hospital knowing all about and wanting to know all about my baby. He was in trouble for a while, even though I gave him mouth-to-mouth help on the way to the hospital. But they put him in an oxygen tent, and then I couldn't see him. And of course, the first thing a mom wants to see is their baby,
Sure.
is that I saw it, but I checked the toes and the fingers, I knew he had all that, and so that calmed me down, but I couldn't see him for the first 3 days. And then finally, they told me, we got to keep another week, you got to go home. So I got to go home without the baby, which was a real problem, hard for me. But I have my husband, who was always on my side and loving and caring, and all the friends around. So then I was home for 2 days, and I was so concerned who's going to take care of all this laundry, which I dirtied so much upstairs in that little farmhouse. So I packed it all up, and we went to a laundry, which I never knew about a laundry back home. Never used a washer like they had, dumped it all in. And as I sat, I felt something isn't right. So when I got up, I was sitting in a pound of blood. So they rushed me again to the hospital, and the hospital then found out that because of the quick delivery, I had a rib inside, which they just sewed up outside.
Muss jetzt ein bisschen weitermachen.
And inside, when I started moving, started bleeding. So anyway, I was there again 3 days, not knowing a word, not hearing a word. He couldn't come because he was teaching all day. So those was probably the hardest time of my life, though with so many blessings and with so much love and friendship from all the people around me. That's about the story in the beginning.
Wow. Now you're. So this all occurred in Michigan, right?
Yes.
So during a snowstorm, all of that's happening, and he's ski instructing on the day. You're sort of by yourself.
All by myself.
In a period of time, he's in a hospital. So he finally comes home. And you probably have to go to the grocery store and stuff like that. You can't speak a word of English. You probably don't understand anything about
Well,
this.
we haven't had a car. And at the time, Hans would always bring some food home from the lodge for me. I waited all day in this one little upstairs attic room. No television, no book, because there wasn't any German books, which I love. I was an avid reader. No radio, nothing.
But I should ask you, you were reading German, right?
Yes.
The language.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
We know
And
that.
we didn't at that time, our thing, we didn't learn any English, none.
Yeah.
Which Hans was fortunate in this private school. He learned enough English that he then could teach some Americans. Yeah. Yeah. So that wasn't it was a happy time having this baby then, and he was just cuddled by me all day. That's all I had till he came home.
So he was the spoiled boy, huh?
I don't call it spoiled. I thought loved. He was loved and cared for, and I had him and he had me, and we were very important to each other.
Yeah.
That's all we had. He had me and I had him, and he was trying to make a living so we could pay the hospital bill.
It's a remarkable story. How did you ultimately learn English? Is it just self-taught, or did you go to
Finally,
school?
I found a little library at Point Mountain, and there were a lot of comic books. And actually, I just looked through those comic books and they helped me to put the words, to put the meaning of the words.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't long, and a year after, Hans said, "You have become so different. You are this bright, social girl, and now you just want to go anywhere." So he wanted me absolutely to go and teach skiing with him. So he asked Ottmar Schneider if he would take me. And Ottmar said, "I have never employed anybody who wasn't an Austrian certified ski instructor."
Mhm.
Well, Hans was a very important part for Ottmar. And then he said, "Well, either you take her or you lose me." And so Ottmar hired me, and I used to teach the little children on the, on the T-Par. And that's when I actually learned more. I could say, "Get up, do this." I could show them, but I couldn't say much. But the children helped me. I remember one thing, a little boy, I used to say, "This is how the way it goes," I said. And then he said, "No, Mrs. Auer, not the way how it goes. This is the way it goes." So children corrected me, and with children I wasn't afraid to try to speak, which I was
Teachers.
careful when I talked to the grown-ups that they would make fun of me, or I really lost a lot of my self-confidence in the first year. And thanks God to Hans Spaß, he always kept telling me, "You're good, you're beautiful, you can do it." And and that's how I slowly. And then of course, I always said he made me from a midwife. He brought me to the United States. Then he had me become a certified American ski instructor up in Vermont. And then I was teaching with him, and it was actually very wonderful because we always worked together. And I said, from the ski instructor business, he bought a house, and we had bed and breakfast. And I did that for 16 years to pay the mortgage for the
Tell
house.
them about, that's when we moved to Bemis.
Huh?
That's when we moved to Bemis.
Yeah. So anyway, he was such a possible force with me and helped me to grow in. And remember, I wanted the first time to go shopping for something. And he dropped me off in front of a grocery store. And I said, "Come with me, I can't read." He says, "Burgi, we're in the United States, and we're going to learn the language, and we're going to live like the Americans. So you will find out." Dropped me off and left. So I don't know if I should tell this story, but I couldn't read. And so the only thing I remembered back in Europe in a grocery store, you would find a tin can with dog food. Looked like a stew outside. And I saw this and I picked that up. I remember that was the first thing I picked off the shelf. And I used to go around and make little holes in the bags and try to taste it, this is sugar, this is flour, this is whatever. That's how my first shopping trip went. Then I came home with it, and Hans was surprised how well I did. And like I say, he never, ever went with me. But then we moved to Akron, Ohio that summer, and we had a little tiny apartment when I was just a little baby. And I used to clean the windows. We were on the first floor, and there were all students there, young families of medical students or whatever. And I cleaned the window, and those kids came running around and said something. And I said, "Yeah." And so after a while, this lady came over. She must have told them that I am not from here, the kids. And we got to know each other. She was very nice to me. And I invited her if she would like to come for coffee, with the dictionary, of course, even though I spoke a couple of words by then. She came for coffee, and we had a little kitchenette and a little counter. And we sat on the counter. She waited for me to serve her the coffee and opened up the refrigerator for milk. And then I closed it, and then she opened up her dictionary, and word by word she said, "Do you have a dog?" And then I said, "No, I don't have a dog." And then she said, "Well, you got dog food in the refrigerator." And we still laugh about that because, that's just how I learned how I learned.
Yeah.
And years later, she used to write, for Christmas, do you still feed your husband dog food? You know? So there would be many, many, many stories which brought me to where I am today.
Well, I'm reading this article here, and, this is, again, come in to meet Sears ski expert, Burgi Auer. Will be at Sears, and she's a native Austrian, and having grown up in the Tyrolean Alps, started skiing as a child. Last year, she was instructor at the Schneider's Ski School in Boyne Mountain, Michigan. This season, she will instruct at Schneider's School in Sunlight Valley, Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
And did he have a series of ski schools, Schneider? Did he have a number of ski
Yes,
schools?
yeah, they did have a couple of them, but we never really went there. We always stayed in Boyne, okay? But I got to tell you the story about this article. We then bought our first car. We bought what is it, your red car?
A Mustang.
Bought a Mustang. And with that Mustang, Hans was traveling for years all over the country, okay, with the private plane, because he used to teach from Boston to Denver, used to teach in the different Sears ski shops how to buy ski clothes, how to buy skis, and then they always sent up a training mat with made snow, and he would show some turns, and so he was gone all the time. In the meantime, Sears thought that I really should be involved too, and Otmar thought too. Well, I wasn't excited, but I did it. And so I drove his Mustang to Denver, Colorado, where I was supposed to have a big show with hundreds and hundreds of people to try to show them how to wax a ski.
Uh-huh.
I just got to tell you that because that sticks in my mind so vividly. And I went there, and I was speeding because I was late, like usually. And I got there. Well, while I drove, I got stopped by a policeman. And so Hans always said, when they ever get stopped, just say, don't speak any English. So I turned down the thing. I spoke some English then. Turned down the window, and he said, hello, ma'am. Can I see your license? I showed him the license. I got the Michigan driver's license. So then he said, you were speeding. I said, I'm sorry. And then he said something else, and I said, don't speak much English. Don't speak any English. Okay, and he let me go. So here I was on that Sunday and all week in that ski shop in Denver, big ski shop, Denver, Colorado. And here I was in the ski shop trying to show people what to buy, what underwear, what socks, whatever. And there comes this guy, and a good-looking, tall guy. He didn't look familiar to me at all. And he said, do you have any long johns? A long johns was a foreign word to me. And I just didn't want to say no. No, we haven't gotten them in, I said. So then he came a little later with a package of red long johns, which was underwear, ski underwear. And he says, you do got them. Oh, I said, I was always a little actor when it came to that. I said, oh, they must have just come in. And then he clapped me on the shoulder and he said, Mrs. Auer, you speak pretty good English. And he showed me that right up. So some of the white stories I had to tell
Was
to
he
over.
was the policeman.
He was the policeman, yeah.
Yeah, he was the policeman.
Yeah.
So sometimes I had to overcome some of these things with not always the full truth, you know.
I've got to ask a question here because there is another article here. Ski pros make August debut in Denver, and it talks about you, born in the Tyrolean Alps, started skiing as a child. She refers to the Olympic slopes in Innsbruck as her house trails. House trails.
That was a house mountain, yes.
Okay.
Because at that time I was already in the midwife school in Innsbruck at the University Hospital in Innsbruck. So we used to, we skied all our life. That's one of the things kids do in Europe. And we had a little mountain back of our house, and we would slide down with some skis. There was never a lot of skis in our family because father didn't believe in it, because he always worried we might break some legs, but we did it anyway. And so we all knew how to ski. But I was no ski pro when I came over here. You know, Opma just made me a ski pro. And he made me do things I really didn't really want to do and wasn't trained in to do, but you did it because they wanted you to, you know. And I wanted to be with my husband. That was the most important thing.
Now we're back in Innsbruck. We're going to go back in history a little bit.
Yes.
In the beginning, you were born in 1941,
Yes.
and you were the 6th child of 12.
That's
How does one grow up in a house of 12?
Well, my father, which at the time I didn't know or we were never told, he was pretty well off. He owned a lot of property. He was very popular
biggest farm in
in the
town.
local politics. He was the head honcho of all the farmers. So we were a well-to-do family, okay? So we had a house with 13 bedrooms, huge. I should have
13
brought a
bedrooms.
picture.
13
It
bedrooms.
was a huge old farmhouse. We had no heat. There was only 3 rooms which had heat. This was the kitchen, our family room, and mom's and dad's room where the babies all were born. And the rest of it all were without heat. But of course, the walls are that big, all stone built. And we would get a stone, every one of us would get a stone, and we would put it in the oven in the afternoon, and then we go to bed with that stone. But we also
Warmed up
had
stone.
all very
Yeah.
nice big feather blankets,
Ah.
okay? So that was our upbringing. We were never cramped in our house. We had lots of room. We had lots of discipline. Our father was a real disciplinarian. My mom was the loving and calm one.
Saint.
Father was very good to all of us. He provided very well. For one thing, we had every fall before we went to school a seamstress for months in the house who made us all new dresses to go to school. In the winter, one came to make all the winter boots. In the spring, they came to make the summer. So it was just, we were a very kept family.
Yeah.
We were always told by father we have to be an example, you know. And so I was not always the easiest one. I was a little,
This is Grace and her fiance in front of the old
Oh,
farmhouse.
yeah. Oh my gosh.
That's the house. It was built in 1492.
So it's still there.
still there.
Oh my
yes.
gosh.
So
Now-
we had a good upbringing, lots of prayer every night. You know what I need to tell you? Our family, our town of Neustift, this where everyone was Catholic. So when one went to church, everyone went to church. When one went to First Communion, everyone went to First Communion. So it was a very sheltered upbringing. I also went to school, which were taught by nuns for many years. So it was, and I was a little, as I got older, a little rebellion. I didn't like to go down on my knees and pray the rosary every night with the family. But those were some of the things which were done as a family. And today I praise the Lord that I had an upbringing like that, you know.
Now, your dad had children before him. He was a woodworker.
My father was married and had a really lovely wife and had 3 children, 3 little girls. And she passed on a pneumonia right after the 3rd little baby. And so he was alone with a bunch of farm help. We had about at that time 80 cows, sheep and goats and pigs and chicken and you name it, we had it. And so 2.5 years later, he married my mom. And my mom was 21 years younger. And I remember one story very well. I asked her once, how did you marry an old man? And then she said, Hans was at that time the same age than her husband was, my father. And then she said, is he an old man? I said, no, he isn't. Well, that was my husband. And you know, she was not educated. She worked all her life on different as farm help. And so she went to her mom and said, this guy keeps asking me to be married. And father said, well, he is an honorable guy, and you wouldn't have a bad place there to be. And so they got married, and they got along well. My father was gone a lot. My mom had a hard time at the beginning because there was a lot of jealousy amongst the farm help that he brought in such a young girl. Of course, those maids all hoped that he would marry them, you know.
Yeah, yeah.
But she did well. She was such, well, Hansi can tell about Grandma. She was just a saint, in my opinion.
Plus, bringing on 3 kids.
So she raised the 3 girls, which only the oldest one could barely remember Mom. She was only 7 years old. And my mom always told me, when she sent the girls in the field to pick some flowers to bring to Mommy's grave, they would say, no, we got them new, Mommy. So they remembered very little. So I never felt that I had stepsisters. We were all growing up very caring and very loving with each other.
So there was 3 stepkids and then 12. Oh my, 15. We're talking 15 children.
Yes.
Wow, that's a crowd. I'm just curious, were some of your Catholic teachers, they were nuns, right?
In the first 4 grades, they were nuns. Then we got down to teachers. Yeah.
Were they strict?
The nuns were awfully strict, but I always remember I was a real favorite of one nun, and when you were one of the nuns' favorite, you were allowed to go with a sprinkle can to the cemetery and sprinkle the graves. And I was one of them who could always go. Was glad to get out of class.
You ultimately became a midwife. How did that happen?
My mom told me I was 7 years old, and I would just soak every little, what do they call it? Puppela, what do you say?
Doll.
Every little doll, she made them out of rags. I would always dump them in water. I would always bathe them. And I always said, I want to be someday something like where I can bathe babies. So that was, I guess, ingrained in me at a very early age. And I always liked to read medical books. Even when I was young, my father had a lot of them. And so this wasn't the case in our family. My father had enough work and enough property that he needed a lot of kids to take care of everything, you know. But I didn't want to become a farm girl, or I didn't want to marry a farmer. I knew there was more out in life for me than that. So my father wasn't very happy about that, but my father had a second house where we had every year a lot of guests from Germany who came for 2 weeks, and then they would go again and the new bus would come. And there was a Catholic young man who became a priest later, and I revealed to him my dream once. And then I said, can you help me? Of course, without telling Mom or Dad. And then he said, what would you like to do? I said, well, I would like to become a nurse. And then he said, well, why don't you go to Innsbruck? Well, they wouldn't take me because I was born in December and I was always too young when the classes started. The new semesters for nursing started. So I couldn't do it. So I went to the Burgermeister, who was a good friend of my father, and I asked him if he would help me. Well, he says, what do you like to do? I said, I like to become a nurse. Well, he said, you got to wait a little. Went back to this young guy from Germany, and he then found me a place in Cologne, Germany. First put me in where are all the people who become priests. In a priest seminar, I had to be there for 3 months, and I had to help in the kitchen, and then he said, I find a place in the fall for you. And then I got into this Catholic, nice big Catholic hospital, and I started nursing. But here I was the only one, the littlest one, the youngest one, the skinniest one, and the one with an accent. All the other ones were German girls. We were 8 people in one room in that nursing school. It was an extra house beside the hospital where the nursing were housed. And I loved it, absolutely loved it. But I missed my family so much, so much. I got so homesick. And I remember what Peter, Hans' son, said the other day. First, you can't wait to get away from home, and then you can't wait to get home. That happened to me. Then I came home for the first time, and my father said, how come you are so skinny? And then I said, well, I'm homesick. And then he said, well, then stay at the farm. No, I didn't want to do that. So I decided I cannot go back.
Weiter.
I cannot go back because my homesickness is going to kill me. I just was skin and bone. So now came the real challenge for me. What do I do now? My father said, well, you work at the farm. No, I don't want to work for a farm. So all secretly with the mayor of the town, I got into Innsbruck to a guy he knew very well who was the head honcho of the hospital, of the university hospital. And he told him that he has a girl, young and dynamic, and she wants to become a nurse so badly. Well, I met him and I told him my story, and then he said, well, we can't get you into nursing school before the fall, but we won't accept the year of nursing you have already behind you. Well, I didn't want to go an extra year, so I said, no, I don't want this. The last part I had in Germany was in the delivery room, and I liked it very much. So then I walked out of this no, answer no, and I walked by, and it says midwife school. And I went straight there, knocked on the door, a lady opened, and she said, we're just having class. And I said, can I meet with you sometimes? She said, yes, you can. I met next day with her, and I told her my challenge, and she said, well, we have started already in July. It's already 2 months, and it's too late. Back to the mayor of the town, and then the guy, a doctor in the hospital said, if I would come and take a test.
Ja, muss aber ein bisschen weiter
Yeah,
machen.
so I went there in a big room, bigger like this, and I was sitting there, and the guy had some questions for me and some written questions. And then I said, I know everything already what they learned there in the midwife school. And he got me in.
I'll be darned.
And in '64, in March, I graduated with the promise of the mayor from our town that I would take over the town and the whole area, which is a big area. And I wanted to come, but the old midwife who was still there didn't want to quit. So then the professor who gave me the test called one day, and there was no telephone in our house. So the lady from the post office came running at noon and said, there is a doctor calling, the professor from Innsbruck wants to talk to you. So I went out there, called him back, and they said, I have a good friend in Germany who I met in the war, and he has a private hospital in Cologne, Germany. Mm-hmm. And his midwife had a problem with his hearing. He needs a new midwife, and he called me because he was the professor of the midwife school. And I suggested you. So to make a long story short, a month later I got into Innsbruck. They came and interviewed me in a hotel in Innsbruck, and I was hired. And the next week I went on a train and back to Cologne. There was a beautiful hospital right on the inn.
Okay, I don't know, you got so much to tell.
Huh?
You have so much more to talk about.
Well, maybe I shouldn't, but that's my story.
No, it's a fabulous story.
And so I was there from, I think it was March till December. And then I got a call from the Burgermeister of our town that I can start the 1st of January. She quit. And then I was there, and then of course on the way home from a delivery, early at 4 o'clock in the morning, I got a flat tire. And Hans came by with his tourist guys to drive him to Venice. And he stopped because I was fiddling around and not knowing what to do. He said, can I help? And I said, yeah, I got a flat tire. He talked to the ladies in the Volkswagen bus. You got to wait a little, I got to help this lady. So I fixed my tire, and I thanked him, and I said, can I invite you to a cup of coffee sometimes? He said, yeah, and that's the end is history.
And here we are.
Wow, that's amazing, amazing. And you also went on to say that, I'm reading your notes, which I can read very clearly, with lots of home deliveries. In fact, you did your first year, you delivered 78 babies.
Yes.
Wow. Do you remember the first you did?
Yes, very, very, very clearly. I lived then at my father's other house. My father had 2 houses. Across the river is a house. And there I had a little apartment, and of course a bell and a big sign, registered midwife, And so I got, bell rang about 2 o'clock in the morning on the 2nd of January. And it was my neighbor. And nobody knew that her daughter was pregnant. And she was my schoolmate. And she just lived 2 houses down. So she said, Tekla was her name.
Tekla.
Can you help her? And I said, for what? She said, well, she's pregnant. So I went down, delivered her baby. That was the first baby.
Wow.
And a week later, I delivered twins for a 42-year-old mother in the village where Hans used to grow up.
My golly.
Without a doctor. One was a bridge baby, and the other one was normal. And that really was my advertisement, because the whole town talked that the young midwife is so talented. She delivered twins, one a bridge baby without doctor, and they're fine. So, you know, I have just had so many blessings and so much help from.
Greg, it's pretty cool when we go visit, when we go to Austria, there are so many people there that she delivered that come up to her.
Grown-ups,
Or even people her age who had kids that she delivered for them. It's pretty neat.
That is really neat. I just, we got this one picture of you.
That was at the University of Innsbruck, where I was in the midwife school.
Okay, that isn't the car that broke down, that we needed the flat tire?
No, that was a car from a friend who borrowed it for us to go on a honeymoon, because ours was broken.
Okay. There we go. And just so for the camera, there's a terrific picture ahead if you could.
Yeah, we had a double wedding with my 5-year younger sister. And like I say, it was a wonderful time. He wanted me to marry. He called from Point Mountain and said, when I come home, I'll marry you. I said, no, we can get engaged, but I'm not going to marry you. I actually always wanted to further my education. I would have loved to go into a little psychology, you know, child psychology, but it never happened.
And you could use it on your kids. Now, we do know you had another son. There was Bernie, you had in Michigan in an apartment, but there was also a guy named Hans, also you had, and you didn't use a hospital there either, did you?
Sucks.
Well, to answer you that, I got to tell you a little story, and I know I'm longer than...
No, we're here all day. I'm here all day.
We had very good friends in Michigan, 2 doctors, and she was a delivery doctor. And that was the second summer I was here. The first summer I was here, actually. And I didn't speak much English, but Hans was very good friends with them because he used to teach them how to ski at Point Mountain. So they invited us to come to Detroit. And they had a beautiful boat, and we went out there all day and got home tired. And she woke me up at midnight and she said, Burgi, I got to deliver a baby. Do you want to come with me? And I said, yeah, you know, that was great news for me. So I got dressed, and she brought me in the hospital. And I remember it was the 4th of July weekend. And she said to the lady, she was laying there yawning, and then she stepped up to her. I understood a lot more than I could speak. And then she said, would you like it on the 3rd or on the 4th of July? I thought to myself, ask one woman in pain, you want it now or later, you know? And then I watched her. She gave her a shot, and then she had a forceps, and they delivered this baby by forceps. And it was so disgusting to me, so different than what I did. I delivered all those hundreds of babies normally, you know, with my 2 hands and the woman's help. And here she had this forceps and the shot, and this baby came out, and it was not a happy first experience how babies are coming into this world. And at that day, I decided, if I'm going to have another one, I'm not going to have it in a hospital. I made a very conscious decision. But then he also came really quickly. Hans was gone, was traveling for Sears, called me that he's coming home for Thanksgiving. And then I remember he came in the night before Thanksgiving and he said, how is our little turkey? And I said, I think it's not going to go much longer. And then he said, but you let me know, okay? I said, yeah.
I didn't want
and at that time, I got to really put this in. Hans never ever wanted to have his children with any babysitter. So when Bernie was born, and he wanted me to go skiing with him, he said, you only go if you get somebody from Europe, either a sister or a friend. So we brought our little sister Barbara over from Europe in December of 66. And she took care of Bernie while I went skiing with Hans. So then when Hansi came, you know, I was in the midst of all kinds of things, you know. So he said, you are not going to leave Hansi and do anything. You're going to have to get somebody over here. So my mom was a widow at that time, and then I asked her if she would come, and she never went out of the country, and my sister got her on a plane, and she came.
Ah,
And she took care of Hansi for 5 years. She was here. I was always home in the summer because we had bed and breakfast. But Grandma really was coming for Hansi. So my children never had babysitters. They always were taken care of by somebody in the family. That was one of Hansi's family rules.
but we missed the part of the story when Hans came. He didn't go in the hospital.
Well, I woke up. He came that night before. I woke up, and I always just needed a big pillow, and I hugged it, and I thought, I'm not going to wait. But then at around 4 o'clock, I woke up and said, Hansi got to bring me to the hospital. Oh my God, he said, not again. And I started the car, it was snowing like mad,
Yeah.
and he got out of town. I said, you got to wait. I think no, Burgi, don't do this to me again. Then we got to the Great Barns, and I had him stop again. And then I said, no, go quick, maybe we make it. And then finally at 4th Station on Washington Street, I said, you got to stop. Pulled in, and he delivered Hansi. So now they can't fight. Both of them were delivered by Daddy.
Oh my gosh. Is this by like McFadden Ford?
And
That's
he,
the midwife.
McFadden Ford, nice.
and he must have done a great job
Thanksgiving
because they
Day.
turned out
Yeah,
was very healthy
Thanksgiving
and
Day.
happy.
That's a remarkable story.
I don't know how remarkable I really don't want this to go too far, you know, because this is really a lot of family
Secrets.
That's okay.
It's unbelievable. It's terrific.
well,
So then your mother comes over and she helps.
we went twice over with her, okay, because she was so homesick.
Yeah.
See, Hansi, love you. She was homesick, so
Yeah.
we brought her home twice and stayed a little while. The first time she came back. When we went over the second time, she took everything with her, her suitcase. She was supposed to stay because her youngest son was almost finished with military. And so I said, Mom is not going to stay. So a day before we left, she came in the room and she said, Hans, would you mind if I come back again? I can't be without this little boy.
Ah,
And so she came back with us again.
So she came back again.
that's terrific.
Yeah.
She was a saint.
What?
She learned how to speak a little English. She would go shopping.
Yeah,
She
but
talked to the neighbors,
that,
and she loved it, but she missed the church and, of course, her family. And the family was all a little jealous that I had Mom for so long, you know. I don't know if did you look at this brochure here?
This one?
Yeah, open it up once. Yeah, this was Eagle Ridge.
Yeah, Eagle Ridge, yeah, with Hans.
Yeah. Yeah, so that's the story, and thereafter, we have had a
got a nice
wonderful,
little side story with Naomi.
wonderful.
He says, I'll show you this, or, talk about coming down. It's the greatest picture. you're showing it again here. That's togetherness. That is togetherness,
Yeah.
my golly.
Well, we had
Well, we made a
our,
pretty good team, I think.
we had our differences, but all in all, we were a very, very good team.
Well, if you didn't have differences, you'd be really unusual.
Yeah, that would be.
And now we're having our 60th wedding anniversary this July, and it's such a wonderful, going to be a wonderful year. Hansi and Carrie had their 25th in February. Bernie and Kelly had their 25th in October, and Hans and I have our 60th in July, and Gracie is going to have her wedding in August.
That's fantastic.
So it's always been about family,
Yeah.
you know. Greg,
Yeah.
it has always been about family.
It's all that
And
matters
I feel
at the end.
I feel so blessed that my boys have taken something on from us. If you are honest, sincere, and hard work, you live in the United States, you can be anything and you can bring it to anything. and they both have done well, which we're very grateful for and proud of.
Well, you should be.
Yeah.
And just a little note, Gracie was a intern here at the Robert Jackson Center.
Was she?
Yes, she
Oh,
worked
God.
with me. I don't want to say work for me, we work with me. She's one bright lady.
We're so proud,
She's
and of course,
very,
she's my
very
first
proud.
Oh,
grandchild,
my
She's a
God.
tiny little
and
thing,
our
but
only
man,
girl, and we just love her
She's
dearly,
so
and wish
well.
her the very best. She has gonna have a wonderful husband in Kale,
Mhm.
who is of course gone to
Yeah.
West Point, and we're all excited for them.
Well, it's excited. I'm going to conclude, this is a notes. I got your notes. I'm going to leave you, I'm going to put this all in a folder and give it all back to you. But Hans gave me some bullet points. You know, be prepared, be prepared. But I'm going to conclude on this last bullet point. This is from your son,
From
sons.
Hans.
They are, in my mind, the embodiment of coming to a new country and living out and fulfilling the American dream.
Thank you.
Close to it.
That's,
Yeah.
Thank you. We're
Thank
very
you,
grateful
Hansi.
for this country and for all the
Yeah.
people who helped us to be what we are.
Well, I had a lot of great tutors along the way.
yeah,
Starting with Jack Helbig in Akron.
yeah.
My kids started calling him Grandpa.
Okay. Well,
Just think of it, Mr. Helbig, who was already passed, and his son revealed, I always was curious, why would he invite Hans over here and treat him like the king? And then he said, now Dad is gone, I can tell you. He said to me, when he was throwing the bombs, when he went over Innsbruck into Italy. And every time he threw out one of those bombs, he said, someday I'm going to make it good. The first boy I meet of this country, I will make it good. And that little boy was Hans.
wow.
And I get the goosebumps
Mhm.
when I think of it, you know?
That's
So
really-
it
Yeah,
was
we became
all,
very close.
Yeah,
I stayed at his family's home, of course, for a while,
yeah.
and I worked for him in the construction.
so we have nothing but praise for all the people who have helped us to be where we are and our family.
Right.
We are forever grateful what this country has provided us with.
Hope to
And
pass something
we
on.
hope that we leave a
In our
little
children and
legacy
grandchildren.
behind which our children and grandchildren can follow. Faith in the Lord, hard work and honesty and forgiveness.
Well, you're the embodiment, I'm telling
Thank you
you.
very much, Greg.
Thank you.
Wonderful,
I'm
wonderful.
going to make sure you put all this together and you don't forget a thing.
I have so many.
I'm going to take a picture of the two of you.
Okay. I have so many things that I almost felt bad, but it was good when
You
Hans,
need to have some in hiding.
when
A
Hansi
couple,
said,
some real ones.
when Hansi said we're coming here, I looked, I had a little chest. It's called the memory chest, and they have it up in Grace's room, and I told her, someday when Grandma and Grandpa are gone, you can go through this chest. And so I was glad I had some of those things.
That's great. I'm sure you haven't seen them in a long time.
I have a lot more, but I just brought some
She
of my
collects
things.
like that.
Yeah, well,
I don't, but she does. Yeah.
but again, thank you so
Great.
much.
It was absolutely
It was
a
our
pleasure.
pleasure.
My
Thank
pleasure,
you very,
my
very
pleasure.
much.
We're going to,
Thank you.
we'll take a picture with you in the backdrop here.